We're never gonna give you up for anything in this world. You are the pride of our forefathers, for they live for you. In my dreams I hear your voice calling, your beautiful face smiling friendly to me. May God have mercy on you, Africa, 'cause we love you, Siakotanda, 'cause we love you, 'cause we love you, Siakotanda, 'cause we love you. You are the pride of our forefathers, for they live for you. In my dreams I hear your voice calling, your beautiful face smiling friendly to me. May God have mercy on you, Africa, 'cause we love you, Siakotanda, 'cause we love you, Siakotanda, 'cause we love.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. This is Weekly Pan-African News. Thank you for joining us. I'm Onya Sanu. I have a comrade with me. Say hi.
And Monica here, also glad to be here.
Very excited to have a co-host again. Woo-woo! But this is Weekly Pan-African News. We do this every single Thursday at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. This is a program presented by the All African People's Revolutionary Party New Mexico chapter. We've been doing this since March, every single week, since March. Kind of bananas. But we started this back in March when the first lockdown happened. Now we're in the second or third lockdown. But when the first lockdown happened, we were like, we can't have our people gathered together getting sick. They're extremely susceptible to falling ill from this virus. They're underdeveloped, so they're not going to get the support they need if they get sick. So we can't risk having people gather in person, but how can we still talk to them? And so this show is one of the many ideas that our chapter came up with to continue to build with our people, to continue to do political education with our people. We cover a different political education topic and also current events and also news about this pandemic from a revolutionary African perspective, because we know for a fact that the analysis that we put out into the world, y'all are not going to be able to get from CNN, from MSNBC, from the Huffington Post, from Fox News. Like, you're just not going to hear our perspective. And so we decided to make our own platform, our own lane, so that we could talk to y'all, so we could put out what we believe into the world, so we could educate our people. So that is what Weekly Pan-African News is. Once again, my name is Onya Sanu. I am a cadre with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. This is my comrade Monica, who is also a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We are in the New Mexico chapter, but the All African People's Revolutionary Party has chapters all over the world. Our biggest and strongest chapters are in the African continent, but we also have chapters in Canada, in Europe, throughout the United States, and in the Caribbean. So we do two things at the beginning of every single show. And also, if you have any issues hearing us or seeing us, or if you have any comments that come up as you are watching the show, feel free to put those in the comments and we will see them and read them and address anything that comes up. But anyway, so there's two things that we do at the beginning of every single show. The first thing is that we want to call in one of our ancestors. And the reason why we do that is because we understand as revolutionary African people that we are standing on the shoulders of people who laid the foundation for the work that we do today, who made that work possible through their sacrifices and through their struggles. It is quite literally a fact that we would not be able to speak to you. Like, we wouldn't be able to have jobs, read, speak to y'all, like be on the internet, if not for, thank you so much, Cheeto, for letting us know the sound is working. We appreciate you. If not for the sacrifices of our ancestors, every single like basic right that African people have in this society, we got by struggling collectively, by sacrificing, by bleeding, by dying. So we understand that we owe everything we are and everything that we have today to our ancestors. We learn from them, we honor them, we hold them up, and we remember them when this society tells us to forget them. So the ancestors we want to bring in is actually a sister who unfortunately passed this past week. And that African is Gloria Richardson. Gloria Richardson. Gloria Richardson, if you've ever seen the picture of a statuesque and beautiful African woman marching through a crowd and like pushing away a bayonet held by a member of the National Guard, that is Gloria Richardson. She was a bad sister. She was so revolutionary, so principled, so strong for her entire life. She was formerly leader of the Cambridge, Maryland chapter of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She was a revolutionary African woman who, although she was born into a middle-class family, like kind of had some privilege, she sacrificed everything she had to struggle collectively for the liberation of our people, because she understood that even if her family was doing okay, it didn't matter unless the rest of her people were doing okay too. So she dedicated her life to revolutionary organizing to build independent political power for African people by leading that SNCC chapter and by engaging in African liberation organizing for her whole very, very long life. Like when she passed, she was, I believe, like in her 90s, and she was still better. So Gloria Richardson is an example of a revolutionary African woman, someone who I very much look up to. That picture of her pushing away the bayonet, like I can picture it right now. It's like a racist European like National Guard member, and they're like, you know, in the 60s when Africans were engaged in liberation organizing, they were very often met with like crowds of armed European men who were attempting to intimidate them, who were attempting to stop the organizing. And instead, when she was faced with that, she was like, get that out of my face. We need to do what we need to do. And so I feel like that picture embodies her spirit, embodies like how committed she was to liberation of her people and how she refused to be intimidated, refused to be pushed aside, despite the fact that she was a woman, despite the fact that she was African. She was like, I have my dignity, you are going to respect me, and you are going to give us our rights. So salute to Gloria Richardson. This is the ancestor we want to call in today. The other thing that we always do at the beginning of every show is that we want to acknowledge that we are on stolen land. Really, the entirety of the Western Hemisphere is stolen land. Before European colonizers came here, indigenous nations were thriving across the entire continent, trading with each other, building communal societies, just living their lives and thriving. And then Europeans came and stole their land and built this monstrosity that we have to struggle with today. But we acknowledge that we are speaking to y'all from occupied Tiwa territory, also known as Albuquerque. The city of Albuquerque was built by European colonizers on Tiwa land. The Tiwa people are still here. This is still their land. This will always be their land. It doesn't matter how long ago you stole something, it stays stolen until you give it back or it's taken from you. So just as the movement for Pan-Africanism is fighting to unify and liberate Africa and take back our stolen land, we support the just struggle of the Tiwa nations and all indigenous nations of the Western Hemisphere in getting their land back too. Understand the US empire is the youngest empire on the face of the planet. It didn't always exist, and it will end. And if we have anything to say about it, the rightful and just struggles of indigenous and colonized peoples are what's going to bring this empire to an end. So this is Tiwa Nation's land, and it always will be land back. So other thing we always do on the show is that we always cover a political education topic from a revolutionary Pan-African perspective. We understand, as Ancestor Malcolm X said, you cannot organize the sleeping people. You must wake them up, and then you get some action. And that is why we do political education, because we understand that this society just like point blank lies, just lies constantly about all kinds of things, just like tells nothing but untruths. And so it creates quite a bit of confusion among the masses of people about our condition, about our history, about our present. And so what the intent behind political education is to attempt to cut through that confusion, develop some analysis, develop some critical thinking skills, so people can actually understand how the world works and how we can change it together. So the political education topic that we're going to do this week is a very exciting and timely one. We are going to be discussing the difference in response to the COVID-19 pandemic in capitalist countries, using the example of the United States, and socialist countries, using the example of Cuba and Venezuela. We Y'all are probably very familiar with what living through COVID is like in the United States. It's terrible. But we're going to go into detail and we're going to talk about why it's so messed up. And then we're going to give y'all some examples of nations that are doing it much, 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 much better. And then we're going to talk about why they're doing it better. So I'm going to pass it to Monica to start off this conversation.
Thank you, comrade, for that intro and everything you do. So as you all know, COVID-19 in a capitalist society is not working out for us. So in the beginning, when COVID-19 started, there was so much misinformation about wearing masks. And so they were encouraging people to not wear masks if people weren't sick. And they did that intentionally because there was an assumption that masks were going to be bought up. And so really quickly, the COVID-19 positive cases were spreading and deaths were happening, and that could have been all prevented if this country would have provided accurate information, even with wearing masks that were homemade. You know, we know masks provide 70% effectiveness to support with not spreading the virus. And so that's what this government did, gave misinformation about that. We also, and that could have prevented like a lot of loss of life. We also didn't really do lockdowns at all. It was very inconsistent all around this country. There was no contact tracing done at all, where other countries early in the pandemic did lockdowns and contact tracing, and we know that worked. And Onya Sawu is going to talk more about what those rates look like when you actually implement evidence-based work to help prevent death because you care about the people. We have no idea how many people have unfortunately passed in this tragedy to this country, not protecting the people. And we're not surprised because how can an imperialist capitalist nation that wants to exploit people care about people? And so we know that the numbers from the CDC are now being passed to the White House, then the CDC. That's what the Trump administration is doing. So the numbers that we currently have is there's been over, unfortunately, 308,000 deaths and over 17 million positive cases. And we know that is not the exact number. There are states who opened up, like Georgia and Alabama, who opened up early. The whole state, even our state, opened up early and aren't reporting accurate numbers as well. Also, there's been inconsistency with testing sites. So there are testing sites all across this country that you cannot go to unless you have symptoms. Well, if you have symptoms, it can be too late. It's almost a death sentence to go when you have all the symptoms. Like people can't even breathe, you know? And so there's so many factors that are at play when you can't go get tested until you're sick. That makes no sense at all. And they were also doing that because there was limited tests and how they administered the test, right? People in line for hours when they were testing, people having to be turned away, lots of different things were happening around that. This country has the highest number of people dying from coronavirus. And it's because they're not implementing any preventable strategies that need to be implemented like other countries have done. People's healthcare are tied to their jobs. Well, guess what? Over 20 million people have lost their job due to COVID-related incidents, whether they're sick, whether they're, the business had to close because of what's going on in society and this government not providing a true financial support. Because what can a one-time stimulus check of $1,200 plus, maybe even $2,000 do when rent is minimum in New Mexico? Rent can look like $900, in some places $600. So is that worth 2 months rent and none of your other bills? Like not providing a true financial package to support people's financial and other needs to have like a real lockdown. And there's an eviction crisis. So right now, as of right now, there's 30 to 40 million people in our community, in this country, facing evictions, right? And so and they gave that federal extra money and stopped it. They haven't voted on a new stimulus package to support the community. And every year, over 3.6 million people are evicted from their homes. And right now, there's over 40 people facing evictions. So if the conditions don't change, so everything stays the same, we keep opening up, there's a chance that we're going to see over 40% of people who rent that are colonized people, that are people of color, that look like me, that are Africans, that are Chicano, that are indigenous, where they're going to lose their homes. How can you pay your bills if you cannot work? If you have no job, you don't have an ability to pay rent. If you don't have a job, you don't have access to healthcare. It makes no sense at all. So again, there's no plan like we've been saying. The stimulus check. Right now, there are over 9 million people living in this country who have not received it, who are waiting for it. Also, for unemployment benefits, there are people who are still waiting to receive them. So people applied in June and are still waiting months and months and months and months later. Over 50 million people in this country have applied to benefits, unemployment benefits, and there's 12 million people waiting. So what does that tell you? More people are going to be tossed on the street like they are disposable because there is no plan to help folks pay for their bills. If 20 million people are not working, if 12 million people are waiting for unemployment benefits, how are they going to be able to pay for their housing, food, shelter, clothing? It's not going to happen. We also saw, even in Albuquerque, people were doing protests saying, open up the business. We need our haircut. Are you kidding me? Like, you want a haircut versus like sacrificing someone's life? Like, what the heck is that about? We know that in restaurants and salons have the highest number of positive COVID cases, but you want a haircut to risk someone else's life when we can just have a financial package that's supporting everyone's needs? Like, the audacity of people with their little signs asking for this government to open up. It makes no sense. And yes, it happened. It happened in so many states. It even happened here in Albuquerque. And they weren't wearing masks. Hundreds of them not wearing masks. And they weren't fined, of course. So we had to call that out to stop all the fines they would try to do for people of color. Also, Biden is president-elect. So many people were saying, we're going to vote for Biden because it's going to be different. He's gonna help the people, and he's going to address the pandemic. And he criticized Trump's administration and Trump's approach to the pandemic. Well, guess what? And Biden said, I'm going to have an evidence-based approach. I'm going to invest in research, even though all the research is already completed to talk about how do you save lives. You save lives with providing financial support for 4 to 6 months. You do strategic lockdowns. You close down everything, and that's how you stop the transmission and support people. Research is already done. So Biden ran on this platform. I'm going to use evidence-based approach to the pandemic. Well, guess what, y'all? Your boy Biden did that to pander, because that is not what he's doing. His plan now is for people to wear masks for 100 days. Well, damn it, that's going to kill more of our community members. The science, what is it called? The Scientific American group, for the first time in 175 years, endorsed the presidential candidate because Biden was saying, I'm going to use evidence-based. Well, I'm wondering about how y'all going to push them. Y'all keep saying, we can push Democrats, we can push them and hold them accountable. He already changed it. He changed exactly what he was going to do. And so he pandered. Yeah, he did. And remember, he has been detrimental to our country's economy, criminal justice, as well as war. And y'all folks, many of y'all were like, let's elect him. He's going to do something different. Well, guess what? There's no plan to save us at all. There's no plan to support with this pandemic. The plan that Biden's administration is doing, backpedaling and saying, we're going to wear masks for 100 days. We don't need to have a lockdown. When all research says that. The last thing I want to cover is vaccines. So vaccines. So there's this myth right now that this vaccination, which Biden is also pushing, is going to be this magic bullet, right? Magic bullet, and it's going to support with the pandemic. Wrong. The vaccine is going to be very similar like the flu vaccine. It won't be all strands of coronavirus won't be covered. So guess what? People can still be impacted, and we won't, and we'll see years and years to come of the pandemic, because that's how the flu works. We have a flu season and thousands of people die. Also, to distribute the vaccine, it would take 9 to 12 months to do it, and everyone cannot get it because they're testing where they tested people for the vaccine. Children can't get it, elderly can't get it, pregnant women can't get it. And they also didn't even have a diversity of people who were part of the testing regime to for the analysis of the data of like how the vaccine, who should receive the vaccine. So they also don't know how long people will be immune if they get the vaccine. There's also a possibility that if you get the vaccine, you can still spread coronavirus. And so all these factors come into play. Like, I'm cool off their vaccine. They're like gloating of this African woman who developed the vaccine. Does she live in Cuba? Is she working with Cuba? Because if she ain't, I'm not taking nothing at all. So you can get the vaccine and still spread the virus. You can get the vaccine and it might not be the right strand. Do y'all hear this? This is nonsense. This is what happens in a capitalist society. No plan, not evidence-based. So many countries have done the research. Guess what? Over 308,000 people have unfortunately passed away. It's going to be more. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. That's all I have for y'all about this capitalist society. I'm passing my camera on your Saul. On your, oh, they're saying they can't hear you.
Damn. Okay, because I have my mic off. I turned it off. Sorry. Okay, so Comrade Sean says the capitalist was trying to figure out a way you can profit off of COVID-19 and the misery of the people, but then the George Floyd uprising happened. And the point I made about the George Floyd uprising is that, you know, that was like thousands of people in the streets, right? But in no place where those mobilizations happened did we see a spike in COVID cases afterwards. And the reason for that was that I was at some of those mobilizations here in Tiwa territory, and everybody was wearing a mask. So we were like in the street together, yelling, turning up, but everybody was wearing a mask because there wasn't a level of COVID denial in those mobilizations that we saw at the reopening protest. Meanwhile, at the reopening protest, every single place one of those happened, there was a spike within a couple of weeks because those people were not wearing masks, those people were COVID truthers, those people did not care about safety, so I want to point that out. Also, Sean says, Florida is included because the Florida governor queued the numbers and suppressed the real numbers of outbreaks in Florida for Donald Trump's benefit. So this is a story that actually just came out within the past week. So right before the election, all of a sudden, Florida's COVID numbers drastically dropped. And then right after the election, they went back up again. So it was like this dip that is like unexplainable. And if you've been following the news at all, Florida has not locked down. Florida is going about business as usual. Like I knew a person that was in Florida and he was like sending me videos of in a bar, and I was like, what are you doing at a bar? But like the video was just like people just like chilling inside with no mask, like all crowded together. Like that's the situation in Florida. So Florida is like almost the epicenter, or one of the epicenters in the United States of this pandemic. And so this dip in cases that aligned with the election was very, very mysterious. And now it's coming out, those numbers were manipulated. And one of like the common things that people have said, they blame China as being the origin of the COVID outbreak, but that's increasingly looking like that actually wasn't the case, especially as it's coming out that there were cases in the United States long before the first case was discovered in China. But also, people have been like, China's manipulating their numbers because China locked down and worked to stop the spread. And so they have never gotten to the point of the level of cases that exist in the United States. And people, instead of understanding, like instead of looking scientifically at what China did, are deciding that China is lying. Meanwhile, in the United States, we have governors, the governor of Florida, outright manipulating the numbers for political reasons. And then also the scientist in Florida, a woman who built their COVID dashboard, recently got her house raided by armed police officers because they're accusing her of hacking. And because she had been posting the real numbers, she said, the numbers in the Florida COVID dashboard are being manipulated. These are the real numbers. They're much higher. And that woman's house was raided by armed police officers on a trumped up warrant a week ago. That's happening in the United States, not in China. So thanks y'all for those comments on Monica's situation, or Monica's a rundown of how messed up the response to COVID is here. And so now I want to talk about a place where it's not messed up. My favorite thing to talk about, and that is Cuba. How Cuba has been dealing with the COVID pandemic. What does the socialist response to the COVID pandemic look like? So first and foremost, some context about Cuba's history when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to solidarity. Cuba, of course, has one of the highest populations of doctors per capita in the entire world, despite being a desperately poor country thanks to the U.S. economic blockade that has genocidal intentions. The U.S. has been attacking the Cuban Revolution for over 60 years. The U.S. is trying to overthrow the Cuban government. The U.S. heavily restricts what Cuba is able to import and export in an attempt to strangle Cuba's economy. And despite all of that, Cuba produces more doctors per capita than any other place in the world. And in addition to that, Cuba, through its Latin American School of Medicine, has trained doctors in the United States and throughout Central and South America for free, to send those doctors back to their homes so that they can assist their people in places where national health care is not provided. So I know a sister in the Bronx, an African woman who is currently organizing that community's response to COVID, who was trained in Cuba's Latin American School of Medicine for free. And there are people like that all over the world. And in many cases, those people are like the foundations of healthcare in underserved communities and communities that have been systematically denied access to healthcare. So that's the Latin American School of Medicine. It has trained doctors all over the world. And it has also sent doctors all over the world. From the very, very, very beginning of the COVID pandemic, Cuba has sent doctors to over 60 countries all around the world, in Africa, in Central and South America, in Asia. They have offered to send doctors to the United States because African and indigenous and Chicano people are being mollywopped by this virus, and the US government is not helping us. And so Cuba was like, do y'all want some support? And we were like, yes, please. And the US government was like, no. So despite the fact that people in the United States, people that look like us, are suffering and dying in this pandemic because we don't have access to healthcare, because we're poor, because we are underdeveloped, Cuba offered to help. This government said, no, we're good. We're just gonna let those people die. So Cuban doctors have been traveling all around the world, helping with the pandemic. Cuban medicine has been sent all around the world to help with the pandemic. At the very, very beginning of the outbreak of this virus around the world, it was discovered by Cuban doctors that a medicine known as interferon alpha 2B had really, really, really good results when used on patients with COVID-19. And so dozens of countries around the planet were like, can we have some of that? And Cuba was like, for sure, and sent it for free for free. We are living through a situation where a vaccine has been developed in the West that is privately owned by pharmaceutical corporations, by Pfizer and Moderna. There's 2 vaccines. And because that vaccine is privately owned, the formula for it is patented. And I was just reading about how global South countries, South Africa and India, went to the World Trade Organization and said, can this patent be put aside for the moment so that we can manufacture a generic alternative to this vaccine, to the Pfizer vaccine? Because the supply is being bought up by wealthy Western countries, and because they actually can't afford the number of doses required that we need at the price that has been set. So can the patent be put aside so that we can manufacture a generic vaccine? And the World Trade Organization, which is controlled by wealthy Western countries, said no. Said, we are not going to put aside the patent. You cannot manufacture a generic vaccine. And so the United States and Europe are buying up all the supply of this vaccine because they have the wealth. And places like Africa, places like Central and South America, places like the Caribbean are being denied access to the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine. People are calling it vaccine apartheid. Meanwhile, Cuba has developed medicines like interferon alpha 2b, like their own vaccines that are freely accessible. They're sending it around the world. They're sharing their research. They are giving it away. They are giving it away. They are not privatizing the cure for this deadly virus. So that's how Cuba deals with it. So that's some background about what Cuban medical solidarity has looked like during COVID-19 and beyond. And now I want to talk about what Cuba's response to COVID-19 has looked like within its borders, so y'all can get a sense of what it's like to live in a pandemic with a government that actually cares if you live or die. So inside of Cuba, the response to COVID-19 has been focused on prevention. Rather than like constantly reacting, like locking down and opening up and locking down and opening up, depending on like how much money rich people lose, Cuba from the very beginning locked down. Cuba from the very beginning was like, whoa, this is serious and it spreads really fast. Can y'all stay home? And in order to make it possible for folks to stay home, Cuba suspended bills. They paid people to stay home. They brought food to their doors. They said, you don't have to, if you are being charged rent in subsidized housing, you don't have to pay that rent. We need you to stay home. And so we're going to make it economically possible for you to stay home. And this is, again, an extremely poor country because it is being attacked by the United States through the economic blockade. Cuba has very little money, and it's still able to say, we are going to pay y'all to stay home because we understand that if you go out and about, you're going to catch this virus. And we also understand that we can't tell you to stay home if you can't pay your bills. So we're going to suspend that shit. And actually, Venezuela did the same thing. I bet you think Venezuela's a dictatorship. But at the very beginning of the pandemic, Venezuelan government was like, we're going to suspend rent and bills. And we need y'all to stay home. And that's, again, a country that has a fraction of the GDP of the US empire that's still able to find the funds required to pay people to stay home. In addition to a lockdown that is actually humane and possible in Cuba, Cuba also focused on prevention. So they asked people to lock down, and then they sent doctors literally door to door in every community on the island. Doctors were sent to talk to people about COVID-19. Like, think about all of the conflicting information that we have gotten about this virus in the United States. I feel like people forgot that for like the first 4 months, the CDC itself was like, you don't need a mask. Thousands of people would not have died if the correct information about masks had been given in the United States. But at the very beginning, the CDC was like, y'all can't even wear them right, so don't even bother. Like, that was literally their position. That was what Fauci was saying. All of a sudden, Fauci's everybody's hero. But Fauci was on TV talking about you didn't wear a mask because you can't put it on right, you stupid pro. Like that, he literally said that. I remember that shit. So like, he didn't say stupid pro, but he said people can't wear a mask right. The stupid pro was implied. But Cuba said, okay, this is what we know about the virus. This is how we know about how it works and how it spread. This is what we know about how to prevent spreading it. You know, wash your hands, put on a mask, social distance. And so they sent doctors door to door to tell people that information. To like talk to them and answer their questions. Like, just off top, when was the last time you got any kind of medical information in the United States in a way that you could understand? Like, even if you have health insurance and you go to the doctor, oftentimes the doctor's like giving you information in a way that's like condescending or racist or like fat phobic or ableist, and you're just like, I don't, what am I supposed to do? Like, it's not penetrating. But Cuba's like, we're gonna go to your house and explain this to you, so we know that you understand it, and so you can explain it to your family. Can you imagine? Like, can you imagine? Like, if you act like a government that actually cares about if you live or die, and so like, I'm gonna send a doctor to your house and explain information to you. Like, oh my God. So they send doctors door to door to give people basic information about COVID-19, about what to do if they catch it, about how not to catch it, about how not to spread it. They also took people's temperatures, gave them COVID tests, saw who had it, and if people had it, gave them resources so that they could quarantine effectively and not spread it to their families. They sent medical students door to door to help the doctors do that. They have, primary care physicians, PCPs. So Cuba has that concept, but the PCP lives in the same neighborhood as the people who they serve. Like, your doctor, your family's main doctor, lives on your block, and you know where they live, and you can talk to them anytime. So just like Cuba has like extremely advanced medical technology. Like, when it comes to like just like basic medical care, Cuba is like miles away in terms of advancement ahead of the United States. But the reason why their medical system is so effective at saving the lives of their people and at keeping their people healthy is not just because of the technological advancements, but also because their primary focus is on community healthcare, on a model of public health that is rooted in community. It's like not top down, it's bottom up. It's focused on preventative care. It's focused on information. It's focused on accessibility, so that when COVID hit, Cuba was already ready to save people's lives, to keep them healthy. And then I already mentioned interferon alpha 2b. So just a little bit more information about interferon alpha 2b. It's actually a medicine that works by boosting your immune system's response. So it helps your body generate antibodies and proteins that can fight off a virus. So it works for COVID, and it was given to folks in Cuba, in China, in Panama, in Spain, actually. Remember back at the beginning of the pandemic, when Italy and Spain got hit extremely hard, like thousands of people were dying, and the rest of Europe was like, that's wild, bye. Like, they just like closed their borders, like abandoned them. Cuba sent doctors and medicine to Europe to help Cuba, or to help Spain and Italy, when the rest of Europe and the Western world abandoned them. And one of the medicines they sent was interferon alpha 2b, which again boosts your immune system's response and helps your body fight off many different viruses, including COVID. And so that medicine has been used successfully, as I mentioned, in China, in Spain, in Italy, but it's also been used in Panama, Chile, Nicaragua, Jamaica, Honduras, many places in Africa, many places in Asia, because like I said, Cuba does not attempt to profit off of its medical technology in the middle of a situation where hundreds of thousands of people are dying. And like I mentioned, Cuba has sent doctors all around the world, so Cuba is focused on keeping its own population healthy. Cuba has that on lock, but Cuba is not a selfish country. Cuba is a socialist country. Cuba believes in international solidarity. And so Cuba is not going to like hunker down and abandon the rest of the world in a situation like this, despite the fact that Cuba is again being attacked by the United States, having its economy strangled, has access to limited resources, and yet they are still sending doctors around the entire world to fight this pandemic. I'm going to read an incomplete list of the places where Cuban doctors are currently fighting COVID-19, so that you can get a sense of how many places would be in a much worse place if not for Cuba's medical solidarity. Belize, Brazil, Venezuela, Suriname, Chile, China, Qatar, Italy, Andorra, Catalonia, Belize, Brazil, Angola, Togo, South Africa, Jamaica, Grenada, Haiti, Dominica, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Antigua, Barbuda, Barbados, Nicaragua, etc. So that was an incomplete list of countries throughout the Caribbean, Central and South America, and Asia and Africa. But in total, Cuba has sent doctors to more than 59 countries, and a total of over 28,000 doctors, Cuban doctors, around the world right now fighting this pandemic. And so for that reason, Cuban doctors have been put up, have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Because if you can, I just like listed off all the places that are currently benefiting from Cuba's medical solidarity. I just told y'all that over 28,000 Cuban doctors are fighting COVID around the world. And so you can imagine, like, just think for a second if Cuba did not exist. Just think for a second the state that these places in Africa and the Caribbean that are already underdeveloped by colonization, that are already denied access to resources that they need to develop strong healthcare systems. Imagine what the situation would be on this planet during this pandemic if Cuba was not around. The United States government tells you to hate Cuba. The United States government lies to you about Cuba. And so I guarantee there are people watching this show being like, she's lying. Cuba's a dictatorship. You don't know anything at all. You don't, like, they're lying. But also, if Cuba did not exist, the world would be in a much worse place, not just in terms of COVID, but in terms of the struggle for justice, period. And that is why, if you ask me about Cuba, I will tell you I love the Cuban Revolution unconditionally, because I understand the importance of a model like that, the importance that a place like that exists. So yeah, Cuban doctors have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. The United States government is lobbying hard to stop that, is spreading all kinds of propaganda and lies about those doctors as they are saving people's lives, as the US government is denying them access to communities that are being devastated by the pandemic within its borders. And so we definitely encourage people to support this campaign to get Cuban doctors the Nobel Peace Prize. That's quite literally like the least that the world can do. Like, they're doing this for free. They're doing it for free out of solidarity, out of a commitment to socialism and humanity. So, like, the very least is that they can get the goddamn Nobel Peace Prize. Like, damn. So we talked about COVID under capitalism. We talked about COVID under socialism. And so now I'm just gonna read some of y'all's comments. Let me see. Y'all are saying you can't hear me. Sorry, my mic was off. Monica says unemployment at its peak has been at 14.4%. That is higher than the Great Recession that is within the United States. So when these half-assed lockdowns started in March, like, millions of people were unemployed, just like in one fell swoop. And a lot of those people are still not working. Like, if you are working in the hospitality industry, in the restaurant industry, the lockdowns directly impacted your ability to be able to continue to make an income. And despite the fact that people couldn't work, there was never any kind of safety net put in place to make sure people can continue to pay their rents. And the rent wasn't frozen either. The best that happened was that there was these like half-ass eviction moratoriums that said that people could not be evicted if they met certain requirements during the pandemic. But of course, whenever you set up a program, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it was a lie.
Evictions
happened throughout the whole entire pandemic. There was no such thing as a moratorium. It was untruths being said to think that people weren't being evicted. So many people were being evicted. In mutual aid now, we see 3, 4, sometimes 5 families living in the same household because of evictions, because of loss of jobs. So no, evictions never stopped. The moratorium was nonsense. Even there's folks who reached out to the governor's office here in New Mexico, and they said, well, the moratorium, it's really up to the landlord. So why the hell have a moratorium? Like, what does that even mean? So it was just like, what was it? Just noise. It was just noise. It wasn't real.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. So evictions, despite the fact that there were these paper moratoriums, evictions were continuing regardless. And on top of that, even the folks that did manage to qualify for the moratorium were still being charged rent for the entire time. And so they said, okay, you can't be evicted for 6 months. 6 months is coming up. These people owe thousands of dollars. And the government gave us some of us, one up to $1,200 check back in April. Nothing since. And now they are talking about giving people $600. So for a pandemic, that's the news that came out yesterday. They're talking about $600 to $700 for the next stimulus check. And they're like patting themselves on the back. I'm like, this has been 9 months. Like, some people haven't worked for 9 months. And their rent never stopped. Their bills never stopped. They never stopped having to eat. So they're in serious debt if they even had the option of going into debt. And you're going to give them a total of $1,800, like at best. Because a lot of people got less than that or nothing at all, despite qualifying for. Like, I have a friend who on paper qualified for the stimulus that never got it. So at best case scenario, people got $1,800 for 9 months of this pandemic in the United States, which is the richest nation on the face of the planet, thanks to imperialism. Like, it's so wild how little they care if people live or die. Like, that is capitalism. Like, every single, billionaire, every single member of the ruling class has seen their wealth go up during this pandemic, as like millions of people are falling into poverty, are not knowing where their next meal is coming from, are not knowing if they can have a roof over their head long term. People like Jeff Bezos are adding like billions of additional dollars to their net worth during a pandemic.
You're making me reflect on right now, Biden-elect, people's hero. I don't even know what that means. He is not saying they cannot financially provide for the people. None of that has said, because the money is there to provide for people's financial needs. He is just saying, we're going to wear masks for 100 days because the money is there. Everybody in this country knows the money is there. Richest country, because of stolen wealth, has money to meet everyone's needs who are not working for the next 6 weeks or more. The money is there, and that's why they won't say, oh, there's not enough money. They're just arguing, right, the Democrats and Republicans, and they don't sign something. They could sign $600. Oh, man, that got me, like, heated right now. What is that going to do?
Exactly.
That's not even going to cover rent. Like, the money is there. You won't hear them say the money isn't there, because it is there. They're just putting their all their eggs in one basket, the vaccine, and so you're gonna start seeing them pushing more and more and more on the vaccine versus being able to put together a true stimulus package that could help people for 6 weeks. Damn, even Canada gave $2,000 for so many months. Like, it's a trip, but that's capitalism. So like, none of us are surprised that do revolutionary work. Like, and so I'm just curious to how people are going to push the Democratic Party, I don't know what that means, or push Biden to really do a stimulus check. Capitalism is not going to let them. They don't care about me. They don't care about you. They don't care anybody who's colonized. 93% of us are dying, and they're still not trying to give past financial needs or do a lockdown. So that's where we are. That's where you are, people.
Yep, 100%. 100%. And the other thing about that vaccine, right? And so, like, under Trump, it was like, inject yourself with bleach, it's not a big deal, so on and so forth. Under Biden, they're like, this is very serious, and also fuck off and go back to work. Like, that's why the vaccine is being pushed as some kind of magic bullet, despite all the limitations that Monica laid out, right? Because Biden's COVID-19 priorities when he gets in office, his first 100 days, what he said was, everybody wears a mask, so like a mask mandate, even though it cannot be enforced. He's gonna have a mask mandate. He said 100 million vaccinations, which both vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, they're both 2 doses. And so when he says 100 million vaccinations, that means 50 million people get vaccinated. They said 50 million people are gonna get vaccinated first 100 days, which is not gonna happen. And then he said, because it's not like there's no infrastructure for the kind of distribution of a vaccine like this in the United States. Like, public health infrastructure is almost non-existent in this extremely wealthy first world nation. And so the idea that 50 million, there's going to be a level of organization present to vaccinate 50 million people in 100 days is like just clearly not, it's not true, but he can just say bald-faced lies and he's not going to get called on it because people in the United States are intentionally kept confused. So 100 mask mandate that he can't enforce, 50 million people vaccinated, but it's not going to happen in 100 days. And he said, reopen schools within that first 100 days. And the reason why he's saying that, the reason why he's saying masks, vaccines, and send kids back to school in the middle of a pandemic is because he wants the parents of those children to go back to work. The priority of this administration is to keep you working to keep making people like Jeff Bezos money, to keep the machine going. The priority is the economy, and the economy is for rich people. At the end of December, the federal eviction moratorium that was created by the CDC expires. And when that federal eviction moratorium expires, I think it's like 6 million people are going to be facing eviction. And in all of these like ongoing negotiations in the House and the Senate around these stimulus bills, which have included billions and billions and billions of dollars for businesses and corporations and almost nothing for you, there has not been any real discussion or negotiation about what's going to happen when this eviction moratorium expires. Even with the half-assed stimulus bill with the $607 check that looks like it's going to pass, there is nothing in that bill that deals with the expiring federal eviction moratorium. There is no plan to help those people that are going to be facing eviction in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Millions of people will be homeless in the middle of winter during a global pandemic in the United States. And there is no plan from either party.
Man, thank you so much I completely forgot how they bailed out billions of dollars, businesses and banks. Banks were bailed out in March before folks that did receive the stimulus check in April. And again, many millions are still waiting on it. And so, yeah, they bailed out banks, they bailed out businesses. There's this federal CARES Act money, and so many millions went to every state. It's not going to cover all the people, all the millions of people, thousands of people in the state, certain states, millions, the 6 million, right, who are still facing eviction. And the ones who do receive it, they're paying back pay. People are paying back pay for the months that they haven't been able to work. Like, why are you passing out federal CARES Act money when it's not going to help everybody? People are still going to be unsheltered, experiencing homelessness because of this country's lack of acting. It's not acting to save lives. It is actually counteracting to save lives, like strategically, intentionally. And so don't do that. Just do a rent freeze. Just provide a full, comprehensive financial packet to people. Because guess what? Everyone won't receive that CARES Act money. That's not right. That's not just. It's harmful more than anything.
And someone pointed out in the comments that that CARES Act money, like the money that was supposed to help keep small businesses afloat, was being distributed to, for example, places like Joel Osteen's church. Racist ass, patriarchal ass church got money from that program. Although I was reading an article the other day that talked about how like straight up like white nationalist organizations apply for those funds and got them. It's just like the businesses that got that money and the folks that were like frozen out, like it's like such a clear indictment of like the white supremacist nature of the United States, because all of these like African small business owners, indigenous small business owners, all of these places that are like mom and pop shops were completely frozen out of the process. But like JP Morgan Chase, Joel Osteen, you know, these like big corporations that already had like millions of dollars were able to get that shit just fine. Like we're able to like hop in line to get the money before it ran out. It's a joke. So yeah, COVID under capitalism is basically just like work, and if you can't work, die. And even if you can work, it's okay if you die. Like we just need to get as much of you out of you as possible before that happens. But in terms of like saving your life, in terms of like keeping your family healthy, in terms of like keeping your children healthy, capitalism is like, you are on your own. And also we're gonna make that as difficult as possible. Meanwhile, Cuba, Venezuela, China, countries that had revolutionary processes, countries that are attempting to build socialism, are able to create the infrastructure required to make sure that people can survive catastrophic conditions like this, can survive a global pandemic, can survive climate change. Because even as all this is happening, COVID feels like the worst thing on earth, but climate change is proceeding in the background and is about to mollywop us all. It's like already hitting colonized nations around the world and forcing them to deal with hurricanes that destroy their infrastructure, and then they can't even get access to loans to rebuild, and then investors swoop in and steal their land. Like, that's already happening. And so COVID is happening against a backdrop of catastrophic collapse created by capitalism. And so we want to close this PE section by talking about, why is it so different? Why is it that poor countries that are socialist are able to keep their people safe, even under unexpected and horrifying conditions? And these rich nations that have all of these resources that, as Monica pointed out, are stolen from Africa, stolen from colonized nations, despite all of the wealth that exists in the US empire, despite it being a technologically advanced first world country, it is not able to save people's lives on a basic level. Why is it so different? The difference between COVID's response, or the response to COVID in the US, and the response to COVID in a place like Venezuela or Cuba, is the difference between a society organized around socialism and a society organized around capitalism. A really important thing to understand about capitalism is that capitalism is about profit before anything else. Capitalism is about organizing the economy in such a way that it'll produce more wealth for a small handful of people at the top, at the expense of millions and millions and millions of people at the bottom. The primary motivating factor in a capitalist economy is profit for the ruling class, is increasing the wealth of the ruling class. That is why, despite the fact that all of the research that's been done about this pandemic shows that the only thing that's going to get the situation under control in the United States is a lockdown and saying people to stay home, despite the fact that that is clear, Joe Biden is like, we would like to send you back to work. Joe Biden wants to send you back to work and put your kids back in school and push this vaccine on you, because Joe Biden's primary interest, his primary concern, is making sure that the ruling class and corporations are able to continue exploiting your labor and profiting from your suffering. The primary motivating factor in a capitalist economy is generating wealth, even if generating that wealth means that humans and other living beings suffer and die. In contrast, a socialist society, an economy that is socialist, is organized around life, is organized around collective advancement. The reason why Cuba has focused so much of its energy and capacity into building the best, one of the best medical systems in the world, if not the best. I don't want to say it's the best because I don't know about every country's medical system, but damn is it good. The reason why Cuba has that going on is because Cuba prioritizes life. Cuba puts the well-being of the people living not just within its borders, but all over the world first. It's not about generating wealth to keep some people rich or get them richer. It's about organizing a system in which everybody is taken care of. Socialism isn't about profit. Socialism is about distributing, controlling the resources collectively and distributing them equitably so that every single person has what they need to live. Can you imagine a system that puts your life first instead of your capacity to generate wealth for someone else? What we're living through right now? That is the main difference. We said before on the show, the choice before us as capitalism is destroying the planet is either socialism or it is death. That is not an exaggeration. The capitalist mode of organizing an economy is quite literally destroying land, life, and water. It is poisoning water supplies around the entire planet. And then as that is happening, as populations around the world are getting less and less access to clean water, capitalism is figuring out how to privatize access to water. There is no living being on this planet that can live without water. We all need that shit or we will die. If you are a plant, If you are a dog, if you are a bird, if you are a human, you need water. You need water. And capitalism is poisoning it and then figuring out how to control it and charge for it as the supplies are dwindling. And that is just one example. And so capitalism is a system that's focused on profit, even if it means mass death. And socialism is a system that is focusing on life and collective advancement and protecting the planet and the life on this planet. So, like, to me, the choice is very, very, very clear. We can either continue with the system, which, if taken to its logical conclusion, is going to kill us all, or we can organize collectively to build a revolutionary movement that will destroy this genocidal system and build one that is centered on life in its place. The choice is obvious to me. It's obvious to those in the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, and that's why we are a socialist Pan-African party. But some people still believe that capitalism can be made to work for us, even as capitalism is failing on every level to save people's lives within this rich-ass empire. The choice is quite literally socialism or we are dead. We are fucked. Like, it's just, there's no other, like, that's as blunt as I can put it. It is socialism or it is death. So that's why. Anything you would add, Monica?
I don't have nothing to add to that. That was nothing but that all day.
Please.
In closing, we want to also encourage people to go to Comrade Ajamu's Umi show. It's every Sunday at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. And this Sunday show is going to be about the differences between organization and mobilization. I can't wait to hear it. My computer's a little frozen, so I'm not able to share the link in the chat, but I'll make sure to put it in Facebook so you all could check out the show. Tune in next week. We are on every Thursday live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So join Pan-African Weekly News. Also, join an organization. As a collective, that is how we bring about change. Organizing together to dismantle white supremacy and build on our own what is needed for our people. Find an organization, join an organization. If you're not part of one, there are so many that you can look up. If you don't like what they're doing, make an organization. We can only create the change that we needed because we only got us. Obviously, this whole show talked about how capitalism is not going to be there for us. So we have to organize or else capitalism is going to continue to kill us. The All-African Revolutionary Party is a Pan-African Socialist Party. If you are African and live in New Mexico, we need you. Come join AAPRP. There are also chapters that Onyesawu mentioned all across the country, in other countries. And so reach out to us and we can put you in contact with them. If you don't live in New Mexico and you're interested in joining an African organization, in closing, because we are fighting for our lives, we are fighting for liberation, we are fighting for revolution. Stay ready for the revolution, y'all.